Hey guys, it's great to be back with you this week. We are going to be finishing off our series on Joseph. We're going to be focusing on two main things. One, how God uses his time to humble Joseph, and two, how he restores, makes better his relationship with his brothers. So why don't you jump straight into the story by maybe using a story version of Joseph or one of the animated videos included in the description and guide.
When Pharaoh calls for Joseph to explain or interpret his dream, he says this in Genesis chapter 41 verses 15. I have had a dream, but no one can interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. And verse 16 goes on to tell us that Joseph actually responds by saying this: I cannot do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. What we see here is humility. Joseph realizing that he himself is not able to do this, but God can. God has used this time of uncertainty and confusion, his time as a prisoner and as a slave, to humble Joseph.
After Joseph explains the dreams and advises what to do, Pharaoh says to Joseph, since God has made all of this known to you, there is no one as discerning or wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders.
Pharaoh clothes Joseph with a royal robe, a ring and a gold necklace, and he rides through Egypt in his chariot with Joseph at his side. And it says in Genesis 41 verses 41 to 45 that the people went before him shouting, make way, and so Joseph was put in charge of the whole land of Egypt.
This is an immense and sudden jump for Joseph, from being a prisoner to becoming one of the most powerful men in Egypt. Lessons learned in humility were essential for Joseph to be used successfully in this way for God's glory.
Humility is a hard lesson to learn, but what does it mean? Well, humility could be summarised as thinking less of yourself and more about God and others. It may look like when you pray and you see God answer a prayer, instead of thinking, oh wow, aren't I boss, my prayer just worked. Instead you think, oh wow, God, you are absolutely awesome. You are great and you are able to do amazing things.
It's also about being reliant on God and recognising that it's him that gives us these gifts and abilities. It's not us that is great, but God through us. For example, if we're good at sport, music or maths, instead of this being something we take pride in and show off about, it's about recognising that God made us that way and gave us those gifts. So it's giving him the glory instead of taking it for our own.
It also means that we serve one another instead of having an attitude where we're out for what we can get. It means that we do things that actually we might prefer not to do, but we choose to do them anyway because we know it will mean a lot for that person or to God. For example, getting along with your brothers and sisters, or putting away those dirty dishes, or maybe just letting our siblings join in with our games.
God can use humble people in amazing ways. When we rely on him and not ourselves, he is able to use us to show his power and his might. The Bible mentions many times the importance of being humble. God himself, who possesses all imaginable power and authority, humbles himself and comes to earth as a poor baby and dies a humiliating death for us. He shows us the greatest example of how to be and live a humble life.
By nature, we are all proud and selfish, and humility is especially tested when we are in situations we would prefer not to be in. I'm sure in our homes during this time of lockdown with our families, our humility is being tested. Why not pause and spend a couple of minutes praying and ask God to come and check in on your heart and get rid of any pride or selfish thinking or behaviour and replace it with humility. Ask God to help you to act humbly this week.
Don't worry if these changes don't happen instantly. We're definitely still learning how to be humble. Often it's something we have to come daily to God for help with. The great thing about God though is each time we turn to him, he always keeps chiseling away at our character to turn it into something good and useful. It's a bit like if you had a piece of wood and you start chiseling away to make it into a useful tool. Each knot, each scrape is a piece towards the finished thing. That's like our lives. Jesus is constantly wanting us to turn to him for help and asking him to keep chiseling away at our character, that we may reflect him more and more and grow increasingly into his likeness and character.
This brings us on to our second point. God restores Joseph and his family. This humility was also required in order for God to bring about restoration to Joseph and his family. If God had not humbled Joseph, it is very likely that he would have used and abused his power and authority over his brothers in revenge or spite. Instead, when he actually encounters them and sees them bow before him just like his dreams foretold, he is filled with remorse and sorrow. He forgives his brothers and is reunited with his family. He returns evil with blessing. He becomes a great blessing to his family, saving them from famine and giving them one of the best parts of land in all of Egypt. However, even in this story, we see how hard the decision was initially for Joseph to just accept his brothers. We see how he speaks to them harshly, puts them in prison for 3 days, and tests them quite a few times.
We see how he is filled with emotion and repeatedly turns away to weep. Joseph has obviously been hurt by his brother's actions, and this is now a huge test for him as he is face to face with all the power and authority he now has as a ruler of Egypt, with those that threw him into a pit and sold him as a slave.
In Genesis 45, we see how, after several tests that he gives to his brothers, Joseph can no longer control himself and weeps so loudly that the Egyptians and all of Pharaoh's household hear as he reveals to his brothers who he really is, weeps over them and hugs them.
Even once all the family has been brought safely to live in Egypt and been given their own land, after their father Jacob dies, it says in Genesis 50 how Joseph's brothers still fear that Joseph may hold a grudge against them and pay them back for the wrong that they committed to him. So it says they sent word to Joseph to ask for his forgiveness for treating him so badly, and they threw themselves before him and offered themselves as slaves.
Yet in verses 17 to 19, it says that Joseph wept and says to his brothers, "Do not be afraid. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good and to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, do not be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." And it says that he reassured them and spoke kindly to them.
Restoration, having our relationships with each other put back to a good place, can sometimes be hard, especially if we have hurt each other, but it's always far better to seek to restore those relationships, because holding on to revenge or bitterness actually only robs us of our joy and our peace. It is far greater and in line with God's heart to seek to restore and mend broken relationships.
Not only do we see the restoration of Joseph to his brothers, we also see the transformation of his brothers. No longer filled with jealousy or revenge, they are extremely protective of Benjamin, their youngest brother. And when their father is reluctant to send him away to Egypt, both Judah and Reuben say they will take full responsibility for him and suffer on his behalf should any harm come to him. When Joseph places the silver cup in Benjamin's bag and Benjamin is ordered to become a slave as a result, Judah steps up and begs Joseph to let him take Benjamin's place so that he may go free. This is a huge change in the brother's heart compared to that of envy, jealousy and spite shown towards Joseph.
What they intended for harm, God turned for good and used Joseph to save the land of Egypt and save and be restored to his family. Jesus is all about restoration. In fact, he came to restore the world back to a right relationship with himself. He longs for unity, togetherness amongst us. This week, why not spend some time restoring relationships with friends or family that may have got a bit jarred recently? Ask God to help you, to give you the humility to maybe be the one to make the first move, to help with, say sorry, choose to play with, leave behind or not react to.
So guys, as always, we've just got a few questions for you this week. Like Sarah was just talking about, ask God to help you mend any broken relationships. How could you show humility this week? And what gifts or talents do you think God has given you? pray over them and ask God to use them to bring Him praise.